Fear is a primal emotion and can freeze us by surprise.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
But in the world of video games, fear is also an intentional choice. Truly haunting games ingrain dread in every aspect, while others use horror as mere flavor. Today I want to explore another side. I want to dive into what changed after more than a decade of game design evolution and why well-designed games feel timeless while a bunch get released already obsolete. We will look at two horror roguelites and explore what is fun about them. Howdy, by the way, my name is Dumitru, also known as Dumivid, and this is... You know you're quite ancient by internet standards when you remember the times that this was considered hot shit. Steam used to be less crowded and you always got the same games on the front page. Just to give you an insight, in 2023 alone, Steam published more games than from the first 10 years of operation as a store. You used to have less choice, but at the same time less paralysis from choosing one to play next. Thus, some questionable games had a much higher chance of being purchased. And all of this is just an excuse why this one is one of the first games that landed in my Steam library over 10 years ago. Let's welcome our first guest. Larva Mortus, the oldest horror roguelike published on Steam, or second oldest. It's hard to tell because Steam actually shows different dates depending if you look on the page itself or in the search bar. Larva Mortus is a top-down shooter, similar to Alien Shooter or Crimson Land, or if you want a more modern analogy, imagine Brawl Stars on Gun Wars.io, but with no multiplayer or flashy characters. You play as the least jacked priest in the Vatican. Your only goal is to collect all pieces of an amulet and kill Satan. Sorta. In your raid you have a nice arsenal involving revolvers, a claymore and some dynamite. Later you also find the cannon from the Series M and a Tesla gun that shoots lightning, along with a few more grounded weapons. Through the level you can also find arcade bonuses like more damage or move fast. Speaking of arcades, the experience system is literally called score. When you reach a certain threshold, you level up. The levels give you only plain stats, life, movement, resistance and so on. You also have a global map to choose a different mission, but overall they all boil down to clear all rooms. With all that in mind, to progress you have to repeat the process for, 30 dungeons straight. The entire walkthrough, at least according to my old Steam playtime, stays around 4 hours. To give you a better idea of what I don't like about this dungeon system, imagine that you had to finish the Binding of Isaac first combat room 20 times in a row. If the game was a static arena, it would change absolutely nothing regarding the process, except for finding keys that you need to open rooms, or rooms that you would clear anyway to get 100% completion for the quest. The only actual new addition is the weapons that we get around every 15 minutes, and after you find all of them, you have nothing else to discover. Small remark, you still have treasures that are again just PNGs with a different score attached to them. No global effects, no local upgrades. Imagine Vampire Survivor, but you have no upgrades, no new enemies, no secrets and no events. Nothing. And you have to play it for 3 hours straight. Now, let's take this shotgun and put it to good use. On the other side we will look at Buckshot Roulette, a dopamine factory disguised as a Russian roulette. When you shoot your enemy, you win. When you get shot, you lose. The initial release was on itch.io, an indie games distribution website similar to GameJolt. If you're looking for new indie gems in their infancy, these are the places to go. We, on the other hand, will cover the Steam release. Because you haven't found yourself in the trash, but in the toilet, you have a strong will to fight and win a case full of money. As your opponent, we have the devil that escaped Larva Mortus and used his fake identity card to cross the sea and settle in Nevada. The main loop consists of loading the gun with a random amount of blank and combat shells, Both you and the dealer get random items. Some double the damage for one shot, others stop the adversary for one turn, and some just straight up ask for help from Herobrine. If you shoot yourself with an empty bullet, you get another turn. If you shoot yourself with a combat bullet, or if you shoot at the dealer with any bullet, you pass the turn. Finish 3 rounds in total, and you either finish the game or you go and play double or nothing as your infinite loop. Now that we have our basics settled, let's dive into the main conceptual differences that I found for myself, and trust me, none of them will be genre or year sensitive as one might expect. First, too much filler content to stretch the playtime. To complete a full loop in Larva, Mortus or Buckshot Roulette, you need around 20 minutes. While Larva tries to keep you engaged with tons of identical monsters and minor stats upgrades, and with occasional new weapons, Buckshot give it all, almost, from the very first walkthrough. And the only thing that keeps you returning is the increasing desire to get better. In this way, Larva Mortus is closer to an MMO, while Buckshot Roulette is closer to chess, or if you think this is too high of a praise, closer to tic-tac-toe. Second, a lot of indie games have an identity crisis. To illustrate this, I will use a great example from even a greater creator. I am subscribed to Ramis' Ismail newsletter. He's a game developer and a game dev activist who tries to make game dev education more open and affordable, including through cheap and sometimes even free consulting or materials. I will include one of my favorite GDC talks from him in the card and video description. In his last letter, he talked about a technique called Dead Tricky Platformer about climbing mountain anxiety, but that's not the name of the mountain. In short, if you can describe your game in one sentence, or if a friend that likes it can describe the entire main premise in one phrase, then your game has a great core identity. He gives an actionable to describe 3 games that you played in the shortest way possible. Here are his examples. I challenge you to guess which games he meant in his description and to give 3 more yourself to stretch a bit your imagination. I will share mine in 2 separate community posts around the time this video will go live. Now, Buckshot Roulette is quite easy to describe. My definition is a dystopian Russian roulette against Kolobok. For all non-Eastern Europeans, this is Kolobok, a character from Slavic fairy tales. Imagine a mischief god like Loki, but a magic creature in the Slavic folklore. If I tried the same for Larva Mortus, the best I could come up with was priest shooter in search of a treasure, and I strongly doubt anyone will come up with something much better. To give you an alternative example from the same era, let's take Plant vs Zombie. I also have a personal story video on how transforming this game was back in my days. The game is mostly a casual tower defense with the goal of defeating the incoming waves of zombies, but because the game had a strong hook and easy entry curve, many players gave it a chance. The game remained ingrained in gaming history with a premise quite easy to explain. I would try to describe it as economic chess where you grow plants to stop a zombie apocalypse. What is XT funnier is that Zombie Shooter, Left 4 Dead and Plant vs Zombie used generic topics, zombies, but twist them in very peculiar ways. And speaking of generic, Larva Mortus has no sense of art direction. If I have to ask you what are the top 10 most common enemies in video games, you will tell me something like rats, zombies, spiders, dogs, slimes, bats, and so on. Also, if I ask you about the location, you might list a mansion, graveyard, forest, cave, basement, and so on. Larva Mortus has most of them. We saw that having dogs, rats, or zombies for an enemy it's not an issue on its own, but the in-game encounters are extremely non-imaginative. If we take Fear and Hunger, the dogs fight was a run killer and was meant for slow players to force them to move. Also, even if you consider Kolobok's visual design not that impressive, I challenge you to find even one more character with similar design, except the Kako demon from Doom series. He's a cutie. Buckshot Roulette uses a grunge aesthetic, quite popular in recent graphic design trends. The main feature is a sense of uncleanliness. Dirt, rust, noise, static, brown, red, or grey predominant colors. Sounds familiar? The game doesn't try to be scary, but rather uncomfortable. Even a greater example is Iron Lung, where this type of graphics expand even more on the idea of loneliness and alienation. The message is clear and cut. The music, visual transition, and juicy sound effects all works towards this art direction. What about Larva Mortus? The game aesthetic is quite hard to describe. It mostly feels like stock prompts photo with a slice of 2D skeleton animation from rotoscoped images cut in Photoshop. If you think what I said is confusing, that was by design, I just wanted to sound smart. Props and backgrounds look quite outdated. This is a good example where the style does not pass the test of time. 4. Updates. To be fair, when I made the list, I was aiming only for 3 key points, but later I remembered one more thing that is generally good advice for indie devs if you have an already good base for your game. Remember, constant updates will win you the race. Unless your game is story driven and you have nothing to add, just keeping your game fresh will go a very long way in sales. Terraria was released in 2011 and the game grew in size over 13 years. 13! And by this day it's one of the most successful indie games in the market. And yes, you got it correct. Buckshot Roulette still gets new updates, and I hope the promised multiplayer feature will arrive soon. While Larva Mortus was never updated from the very release, except for tags and descriptions in the market. Don't get me wrong, when you start to compare more games side by side, you start to see patterns more often. Before I started making this mini horror series, I was convinced that roguelikes are always much better than roguelites in any way. I believe that inherent progress is a must for modern games, but seeing how many of them use it to grind you into a corner, you start to appreciate more the games that allow you to have fun from the get-go. I know that at the end of the day, it's not really that fair to compare a game this old to a new release from an obviously talented or good working developer. But first, some games age very well even without updates. The first FNAF is a good example, even though the game is 10 years old. And second, I wanted to show you how much progress we made from this period and how much even a single person can accomplish with the right idea and mindset. I hope this inspires you to explore new games and try to make your own. If not, that's completely fair. At least make yourself comfortable and enjoy your ride, we have so much more to cover. In the end, I don't want to bash the authors. All I want to do is show what and how some games work and hope that everybody will learn a lesson and move forward. If the creators of Larva Mortus will release a masterpiece, I will be among the first to cover it. Now, if you eat spooky games for breakfast, check this video where I compare Steam horror suggestions from different genres. I try to stay as objective as possible, but you can check out for yourself how it turned out. For those contemplating backing this channel, leave some feedback in the comments. My endorphin circuit will be very pleased with your input. Also, if you like to create games and don't know how to draw or just want some experimental fun, check out my itch.io page. I have quite a large variety of games and assets that are waiting just for the perfect Neko. If you try them out and have an interesting idea on how to improve, please share it as well. Thanks again for being with me, have a nice day and don't forget to stay positive. See ya!